has been a while. I know, I'm sorry. I did take a little vacation, so I've been, getting some sun. And I'm back, and it's so good to be back with you. I've missed you. And I heard some true crime news that I thought you might like to hear, because I think we all get each other. We don't like Bryan Kohberger. I don't think there's a whole lot of you watching right now who do. I'm just going to take a flyer on that one. And if you're like me and you want him to suffer in his 60-some-odd-year sentence that he's just starting, well, have I got a show for you. Turns out the other inmates don't much like Bryan Kohberger. They're not afraid to tell him. This guy apparently can't get an ounce of sleep in his cell because the other inmates have decided to team up on a 24-hour attack of noise. And they're trying to scare the bejesus out of the guy. I'm going to explain all of it, how they do it, because the guy's in solitary, and presumably a lot of those other inmates around him are in solitary as well. But no matter, they're getting the job done. I'm thinking that his victims' family members would probably appreciate this as just at least a little good news in a lot of bad news. I'm going to tell you all about that in just a moment. And then also, when it comes to people like Bryan Kohberger, Ted Bundy. There's a lot of similarities between these two guys. And we're just learning something about Ted Bundy right now that's kind of breathtaking. The serial killer apparently was a real-life Hannibal Lecter in that he sat down with the cops to try to help them catch another serial killer, the Green River Killer. Going to talk with one of the police officers that tracked Bundy live on the show tonight, talk a little bit about how do you even begin to believe this guy? And what's it like being Clarice Starling? That's the job I would have wanted. And then if you loved the docuseries Inventing Anna like I loved it, it was like a drama, all about Anna Delvey, the phony heiress, con artist extraordinaire. There's new news about Anna Delvey. Apparently, she's created a bit of a stir using some bunny rabbits. And unless you think she's a bunny boiler, that's not the story. But there is something about this lady that has made her even more unlikable. And that's the picture. Do you see it? Do you see the thing I'm talking about? I'll tell you in just a hot minute, but don't go anywhere because I want to start at the top. It did not take long, folks. It didn't take long at all. Bryan Kohberger, or as the state of Idaho likes to call him, inmate number 163214, has not been in the state's maximum security prison 2 weeks yet. And already I can safely report that he hates it. And now I'll give you just a second to get your Kleenex ready. The quadruple slasher is in a one-man cell in solitary, or as the state of Idaho calls it, J-block. That's supposed to be for his own protection, but the officials cannot protect Bryan Kohberger from everything. And a source is now telling NewsNation that Kohberger's fellow hardcore offenders are going out of their way as far as they can to make the notorious newcomer miserable. We're told that they are taking turns and shouting through the air ducts all day long and all night long to keep Bryan Kohberger from being able to sleep or to keep him from even hearing himself think. He's reportedly asked the guards for, little help here. Can you do something about this? Which is, honest to God, a conversation that I would have paid good money to hear and even more money to be present for. But you know who else has trouble sleeping these days, Bryan? The families of the 4 university students that you slaughtered. And for that matter, your own family. They're probably struggling to sleep too. And P.S., Bryan Kohberger, all of these petty annoyances could have been avoided if you'd just gone ahead with your trial and been convicted. I could keep going and going, but instead I want to bring in Chris McDonough. He's the director of the Cold Case Foundation, a retired homicide detective and co-host of The Interview Room on YouTube. Chris, good to have you on the show again. I don't know what it is about hearing news like that, but it just makes me feel good in a story where I have yet to feel even an ounce of good. How true is it? How bad is it?
Yeah, so actually, the good news is the inmates apparently were waiting for him. And when he got there, they are now making his life absolutely miserable. They're utilizing the vent system. They're kicking the doors. They're taunting him. And they're basically, torturing him through, using psychology. And my goodness, he's complaining. And the guards at this point, the most they can do is write it down or, tell him, hey, there's nothing we can do. You're not in physical harm.
I have so many more questions, and I'm going to ask them, but I do want to touch on that last little bit, physical harm, because as I understand it, he's in cages within his cage, meaning he's in a cell for 23 hours a day, and there's a slat for food. He gets out for an hour a day, but if he gets out, he goes into this big room in the middle, and there's usually a cage in the middle where he can be, or he can be handcuffed to one of those little desky type tables if there are other inmates who are nearby. How can people get close to his door? How could people get close to him and actually put him in physical danger, or can they?
Well, actually, there are about 32 inmates apparently in the J block currently. And within those 32 folks, they are the worst of the worst, outside of death row, of course. And he's in J block. So what that would be, that's called a special housing unit, right? An SHU. And it's really a prison within a prison. However, the disadvantage that he's at, there's not a whole bunch of room where they can start moving other inmates around. So what they want to do is keep him in protective custody right now until, he goes through the process of where do we fit this guy through the whole prison system for the rest of his life. And so he's meeting with doctors. He's going through, the systems of evaluation. And they're not going to put him into general population, but until that happens, the inmates have come up with a creative idea in harassing him to the point where it's basically driving him crazy.
So I have a question about that. How does it happen that they are all in collusion, almost creating a 24-hour schedule? Is that normal? Does this happen a lot, that prisoners will band together and say, let's get that one guy and let's all work together to do it?
I don't know if they necessarily band together outside of they knew he was coming. This was such a high-profile situation. They were aware that he was coming to, the IMAX prison up there in Kuna. And so they got together and said, okay, well, how do we harass this guy? And so my understanding is there's a couple of different ways of doing it. You can do it through the door, through the slot. The whole facility as a whole was built in 1989. So it's just one concrete echo chamber. And so they also can do it by kicking the doors. They even have folks that are called door warriors that just kick the doors to drive people crazy. And they can talk through the vents. And believe it or not, actually, one of the vents they can talk through is they remove the water out of the toilets, and they can actually talk through the toilet to another cell nearby. It's like this gigantic, acoustic chamber. But my understanding is they're using the vents currently.
So what if, Bryan Kohberger complains to the guards? We're hearing that he's been asking for help. Are they under any obligation to help him from bullying as long as his personal safety isn't being threatened?
Well, they're under obligation to basically protect him, right? And so, but in this particular situation, he's in an isolation situation. So those around him that can't get to him physically, so they've come up again a way of circumventing what the rules may be, right? Communication's a no-no within the prison, and inmates are extremely creative. They use a phishing system, for passing messages, from cell to cell by tying toilet paper together with messages, and then they throw a little rope or a little line to the next cell, and that they call that fishing. And the notes are called kites, Kites. And so they're very creative on how they want to communicate. And apparently they set this up long before he got there, unaware of, the guards were unaware of it until it started happening.
So how long will it go on for? Because obviously, if you feel the way I do about this guy, you kind of want it never to end. If you're the families of these 4 kids, you want this to be much, much worse than just noise. How long is it likely that this sort of attack is going to continue?
Well, I think the only way they can prevent it from occurring, one, the inmates have already made their mind up. They don't see him as a welcomed guest in their house, and that's how they see it. This is their facility. It's controlled by obviously the state, and it's very well controlled, very protected, but he's already at a negative deficit with the inmates based on this information. And so as long as they feel they want it to go on, it will continue to occur. And the guards' responsibility, the corrections officers, is just make sure that he's not physically harmed. They can't control the psychological aspect of this.
Yeah, and then prison is so much a psychological, battle every day. So I'm going to ask our control room to re-rack some of that video from inside the unit that we were looking at that shows the single cells and then that center room. Those tables, Chris, in the front, and you'll get another shot in a second. They look like students' desks, and what we understand is that each one of them has a handcuff, and if you're going to sit at those desks, you have to sit at the desks handcuffed. What would the reason for that be? Like literally just to be able to get out of one of those lock cells, just to sit, almost socially distanced from another inmate? Or are these for classes? What are those desks for?
Well, most of, that's the center of the pod is what they call it. And there's, sometimes there's TV privileges and those types of things. But the one thing, to your point, Ashleigh, is to keep this idea that he is in maximum security. So that means 23 hours a day, he's going to be locked up. And I've been up to Pelican Bay, which is in Northern California, to visit prisoners, when back in the day. And these guys are escorted 23 hours a day when they're brought out of a cell for 1 hour. Meaning they're monitored for 23 hours. They're brought out for 1 hour. And they're put into these cages outside sometimes for exercise. They get 1 hour. But while they're doing it, they're escorted by 2 guards on either side, waist bracelets, as well as ankle bracelets. And up in Pelican Bay in Northern California, they actually have a catwalk where they have a 3rd guard above this escort team. And so those tables right there tell you that person is not moving unless the authorities give them the permission to get up and move. And that's why they're handcuffed to those particular tables.
One last question, because I have this sort of running Hollywood movie in my head about what it's like for those 1 hour movements. When that door opens up and Bryan Kohberger is belly chained and gets escorted, what kind of noise happens then? Will the other inmates all know Kohberger's on the move, and will they react sort of in unison?
Oh, absolutely. That entire pod will light up with heckling, with taunting. I mean, they'll start kicking the doors. And if he's made any enemies in any way, shape, or form, even before getting there, sometimes that information flows rather rapidly before the inmate arrives. And that's one of the reasons they're keeping him segregated away from everybody currently.
No honor among thieves. You'd think that, in a maximum security lockdown, these guys would all be the worst of the worst, but I guess you can always be worse, and Bryan Kohberger certainly is. Chris McDonough, it's really great of you to help us get this information. Like I said, through Schadenfreude or whatever it is, I feel a lot better knowing that his misery just deepens daily. So keep the information coming. Thanks for that.
I will. Thank you.
All right, folks, complaining about prison is yet another thing that Kohberger has in common with another infamous killer, Ted Bundy. Bundy was put to death in Florida back in 1989 for killing 2 college students, though he had already killed dozens more women and girls in other states. In his view, his cell in Florida was cramped. He also complained that he'd become, in his words, a prison tourist attraction. There were a number of parallels with Kohberger that came to light soon after the King Road killer was arrested. Both had a legal background. Kohberger studied criminology. Bundy attended law school. Both targeted college students, and both attacked their victims while they were sleeping. Both committed up-close and hands-on murders and crossed state lines in the process. Interestingly, Bundy noted the similarities between himself and other killers even before many cops did. He even volunteered to help track down another serial killer, the so-called Green River Killer. And I've got the audio tapes to prove it. Never before heard recordings of one monster profiling another when we come back. Stop me if you think you have heard this story before. Investigators who are tracking a vicious serial killer turn to an unlikely ally for help. Another serial killer. And then a cop with special expertise visits that monster in jail, hoping to get something, anything, that might help them catch the killer on the loose before that killer kills again. I know, it was awesome. It made for a best-selling novel and then a blockbuster movie, The Silence of the Lambs. But guess what? It actually happened in real life, too. 10 years after Ted Bundy murdered his way across Florida and a few other states, too, Bundy offered to help police catch the Green River Killer, who was preying on women in Seattle. Bundy knew that area because he'd been stalking and had actually killed there himself, and he certainly knew the mindset. So he ended up sitting down for in-person interviews with 2 detectives named Dave Reichert and Robert Keppel. And now, for the first time, we are hearing audio tapes from those interviews in a Hulu docuseries called Ted Bundy, Dialogue with the Devil. Here's a clip. Oh my God, I would love to be in that interview. Ted Bundy suggested that detectives stake out fresh burial sites in case the killer returned. That advice, unfortunately, led nowhere. But eventually, police traced DNA from the Green River victims to Gary Ridgway. And Ridgway was arrested in 2001. That was 12 years after Bundy was executed. I'm joined now by someone who knows as much about Ted Bundy as anyone alive. Roger Dunn was a rookie detective in King County in Washington when young women began disappearing in the mid-1970s. Dunn and his partner, Bob Keppel, quickly realized the disappearances were connected, and eventually they were all tied to Bundy. Hey, it's just great to have you on, Mr. Dunn. Thank you so much for being on the show. First and foremost, you rarely get to meet somebody who's been face-to-face or had the opportunity to get inside the head as best you can as Ted Bundy. What on earth was that like?
Well, it was a brief meeting. It was, he demanded that his attorney, John Henry Brown, be brought into the interview. I had been staking out an apartment, and Bundy showed up in his Volkswagen, and I waited a little while and went up and knocked on the door to see if I could get some kind of a reaction out of him.
What kind of reaction did you get? Anything?
No, pretty flippant. He wanted his attorney involved and didn't say anything about the case, nothing of any consequence.
You know, I haven't had an opportunity to be in front of a lot of serial killers, but I've seen tapes and I have seen allocutions in court. I watched Dennis Rader talk almost with glee about the details of his killings. And they seem so despicable and unlikable. But I keep hearing the opposite about Ted Bundy, that in the room, you could not imagine that he was the person that he really was, a monster.
Yeah, he was pretty glib and suave and fooled a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, to that question about fooling a lot of people, super fascinated when I heard that he sort of offered the Hannibal Lecter role to help police maybe get inside the head of the Green River killer to try to track that killer down. Can you tell me about the process that police used and why they would have believed anything that this glib, full of attitude, killer would say?
Well, Bundy was playing every card he had in trying to extend out his life. And I'm sure he reveled in toying with the cops right up to the end. Or at least that's how he perceived it.
And was he believable? Was he, like, when he gave information, when he spoke in those tapes, did the police believe it, or did they take everything with a grain of salt and really only use a small percentage of it, if any at all?
No, I think Bob had to take it with a grain of salt, realizing that Bundy was probably pulling the ultimate con as his time wound down.
Was any of his information useful? I mean, it was quite a long time afterwards, I think 12 years after the execution of Bundy, that Gary Ridgway was hauled in. In retrospect, did they see that maybe some of his analysis was helpful or useful or might have led to other clues?
Well, I think Bob felt that anything that he could get out of Bundy would help our case from the 70s. And I think he profiled Ridgway pretty well. His personality, type of guy he was, kind of takes one to know one.
I'll say. Did they say at any point that that Bundy kind of, again, I always go back to Dennis Rader, watching Dennis Rader enjoying winding everyone up and shocking the hell out of all of us with his evil. Did they say that Bundy did the same thing when he was in the room, that he watched as people squirmed with the details of his behavior? Did he try to scare people or shock people? Or did he try to do the opposite, convince them that he wasn't that man that we all knew he was?
No, I think Bundy, when it came right down to it, gave Bob crucial information about the crime scene just east of Lake Sammamish, and also about Taylor Mountain, where the victims were dumped, that no one else had that knowledge other than the killer. And I don't know what Bundy's motive was to tell him the gruesome details about his decapitation and his necrophilia, but Bob just took it as professionally as possible, and I think Dave Reichert did too.
And, back in the 70s, we would never have talked about getting, therapy for some of the horrors, that you're working with in your daily office routine. Maybe today it would be very different. That's pretty hard stuff to process. I have one other question about the gumshoe efforts back in the 70s. As I understand it, the cops were able to narrow a list of suspects down from 3,000 to 25, and Bundy was in that 25. And apparently, one of the big tools that they used to do that was a computer. How fast do you think that work could be done today, given all the tools in the toolbox of forensic scientists?
Probably hours, if that.
Wow.
And our list was, we had it narrowed down to 100, not 25. And Bundy was in that 100.
When you see the pictures Does it invoke anything in particular for you, knowing that you were so close to that case, or do you just look at it as another day at the office when you see a guy like that on the screen?
Oh, no, I don't think anybody could take it as another day at the office. It had impacts on everyone, especially the families. The families have gotten a short shrift in this deal. They haven't really been acknowledged, and that's something that I feel bad about, that the media hasn't focused on the families and the pain they've carried the rest of their lives. Yet Bundy still lives on in some people's minds.
That is a fascinating statement, Mr. Dunn, and I will tell you, as someone who works in the media, it's a double-edged sword. If you want to shine the light on the families, oftentimes the media is rebuffed. They want peace and quiet and solitude and tranquility, and they want to grieve, and they don't want the Klieg lights, and you know, later on, that's what happens. The focus ends up on the killer and the details that come out in the trials. But I see what you're saying, and I hope that we can somehow, you know, walk that fence appropriately, and maybe we're getting better at it, but I know we have a long way to go. Mr. Dunn, thanks so much for being on. I appreciate this, and thanks for all the great work you did in your career.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Roger Dunn joining us. The Hulu docuseries Ted Bundy, Dialogue with the Devil, is streaming right now. And still ahead tonight, the mystery of the missing TikTokers. Miranda and James Derrick didn't spend years posting dance videos and amassing millions of followers, only to vanish off the face of the internet overnight. That is exactly what happened. And now their followers aren't the only ones questioning the timing of their disappearance. The couple's connection to a controversial pastor is also under scrutiny, mostly because he's been compared to a cult leader. We've brought you his story before, but you haven't heard the latest twist, which is next. When it comes to things that people survived without for thousands of years, but nowadays cannot even imagine how we did it, TikTok definitely is at the top of the list. A big part of TikTok's appeal are the dance videos, right? And two of the biggest TikTok dance stars are actually a married couple named Miranda and James Derrick. Over the years, Mr. and Mrs. Derrick attracted millions and millions of followers. But now they have done something that's gotten them even more attention than their most popular video. They vanished. Yeah, they just vanished. Their TikTok presence is deleted, wiped clean, like they never existed. Millions of followers just poof. It's a mystery, but the timing might actually offer a bit of a clue. The couple went off the grid 2 weeks after federal agents raided properties that were associated with a California pastor named Robert Shin. And if that name rings a bell, you have heard about him on this show and in the hit Netflix docuseries Dancing for the Devil. Robert Shin's critics say he lures young and talented influencers into his church/talent agency. I know, I don't get that either. And that he promises wealth and fame in this life and salvation in the next life. In exchange, he allegedly demands a very big chunk of their earnings and isolation from their families and friends. Robert Shin has never been charged with any crime, but the feds are said to be investigating, and they're investigating some pretty serious stuff, like sex trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering, tax evasion, and pandemic fraud. On July 25th, it got real. The FBI, the IRS, the Labor Department, even the Postal Service showed up bright and early and banged down that gate, just battering ram right through the gate. And they raided Robert Shin's home, as well as a couple other properties as well. I mean, you got power to take a gate down like that, right? And although nobody was actually arrested, several people were led away in handcuffs. That's never good. As for the Derricks, Mr. and Mrs. Derrick, Miranda and James, they're members or clients or parishioners, some would say they're victims, of Shin's 7M agency and the Shekinah Church. They deny that they are in a cult, but an independent journalist who's been on this story from the beginning says every dollar from James and Miranda's content flows straight to Robert Shin. Katie Joy, welcome back to the program. It's great to have you. You know, things seemed to go quiet on the story for a little while, and then, like, the battering ram showed up, bang, they took down the gate and they raided that property and a bunch of other ones, and then this really weird development. It's almost like the opposite of a noisy raid. It's a silent poof. But there's a lot of noise to their disappearance. Characterize for me what this means, how significant it is that the Derricks have gone radio silent.
This is a pattern with Robert Shin, and people are very concerned right now. He has a history of deleting evidence when he gets stuck into situations where he might face legal consequences. And when we made the Netflix docuseries, Dancing for the Devil, if you recall, Nicholas Riano, his parents were on that, and Nicholas's entire social media was wiped out like the same day that everything went on Netflix. And so much like what he's done with Nicholas Riano, we think that he is pulling Miranda and James off the internet so there's no trace of them if and when he is arrested. This is a pattern to try to conceal evidence, in my opinion. And to say that people are concerned is an understatement, because James and Miranda have spent years building that audience. I mean, this was blood, sweat, and tears of these two that they had created before Shin ever entered into their lives. I mean, James had over 5 million followers on his TikTok. Miranda had 3. You know, this was their labor that's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like drilling for oil, hitting a gusher, and capping it right away. It's a unicorn. You caught the unicorn, and then suddenly it's gone. So, what is the prevailing wisdom, that Robert Shin shut it down, that the feds shut it down, or that maybe the Derricks have just amscrayed and they're trying to get as far away from all of this as possible?
We wish it was that the Derricks have left, but we really don't think that's the case. James and Miranda have not been in touch with any family or friends since everything's gone down, which isn't super unusual, but people are worried because they haven't heard anything. And I don't think it's that they've left. I do know that Robert Shin's attorneys, they filed a motion in California in Los Angeles Superior Court after the raid, letting the civil judge know, because he's being sued by 8 people over a variety of different claims, claiming that the investigation is almost a mirror identical of the civil complaint, and that nearly every co-defendant, along with Shin and his wife and his mentors, are named in this federal investigation. And they are trying to stay that litigation and say that they can't say anything. They need to, remain silent. They will incriminate themselves. And that was on July 31st, basically saying our clients aren't going to say anything. We expect them to be arrested imminently with an indictment. And it was around that same time that Miranda and James went silent. We did not expect them, though, to delete this. This was a shock.
So do we expect that charges could be around the corner? You don't see a gate like that rammed and a property like that raided, and then this weird, TikTok behavior. It was like P. Diddy. When we saw the raids, we kind of counted down the days till he was charged. Do we expect that this guy's going to get charged at some point soon?
Oh, that's the prevailing thought. I mean, even Robert's attorneys in the court documents seem to believe that there is an imminent indictment coming for, he noted in the filing, human trafficking, money laundering, sex trafficking, sexual battery, forced labor, pandemic fraud for unemployment and PPP loans, along with mail fraud, money laundering, going into members' bank accounts. Yeah, it's so much. I mean,
it's a lot.
The hope is that he'll go to prison for life. He's 67 years old, so.
If he's guilty, but right now he is not even charged. But Katie Joy, stay on this for us and come back, and let's update it when there's something more, if another shoe drops. Thanks so much for this.
For sure. Thanks, Ashleigh.
Good to see you, Katie. Thank you. Okay, coming up next, the 3 little words that make New Yorkers' blood run cold if they're old enough. Son of Sam. That was the self-given nickname of David Berkowitz, a spree killer from almost a half-century ago. And while he is still marking time in a New York prison with more than 100 years left on his sentence, a new generation is learning all about his year-long reign of terror, and even hearing his voice on decades-old tapes that are only now seeing the light of day. It is our True Crime Rewind, and we're playing tapes next. If you were watching earlier, we interviewed a detective who investigated Ted Bundy's murder spree in the 1970s. And if you were alive back then, like in the summer of 76 all the way through till the summer of 77, you will no doubt remember another killer who more than earned a place in true crime history, not to mention hell. In that one horrible year, David Berkowitz, AKA the Son of Sam, shot 6 people to death in New York City and wounded 7 others. He was arrested 48 years ago this week, August 10th, 1977, and the world learned that the man who single-handedly terrorized the nation's biggest city was a postal worker who claimed that voices in his head told him to kill people at random, most of them shot to death as they sat quietly and peacefully in a parked car. Berkowitz left a few taunting letters behind at his crime scenes, and he sent a few to the New York Daily News as well, and he signed them Son of Sam. Eventually, he pleaded guilty to all 6 murders, and he got 25 years for each of them, to be served one sentence after the other. Even though he's very much still alive, nobody's heard much about him or from him in the decades since, but a new Netflix docuseries includes some never-before-heard audio tapes from a reporter's interview in 1980. Have a listen.
All I ask from people, you see, is to be open-minded. You know, let them hate me as much as they want, you see, but at the same time be open-minded so that they can learn something from this. The line is just between thinking about it and doing it. But to cross the line, to me, it was frightening, you know. The feeling of power. I didn't enjoy it. I just needed to do it.
I didn't enjoy it. I just needed to do it. The sound, by the way, that's real in the Netflix doc. The recreations for the visuals, that's an actor. But David Berkowitz is now 72 years old. And you may be alarmed to hear that he is up for parole next year. Do not worry, because he's been up 12 times before. And each time he's been sent right back to his cell. We don't expect anything to be different this time.